So in my last video, I was very personal and talked about a situation that was specific to me because I believe that there are echoes of my very bad experience, admittedly, in other people. I'm seeing it a lot on Twitter. I'm seeing a lot in person. There are just a lot of people who are complaining about the same things, who are traumatized by the same things, who have PTSD from the same things. Today, I want to talk a little bit broader, and I want to go sort of above the canopy and look down at the sort of socioeconomic situation that we're in. The interesting thing about the Twitter discussion that's been going on around food between boomers and millennials and zoomers is that boomers are now trying to pretend like they are the greatest generation. And that has always been something that they have desperately wanted but won't admit. They will not admit that they want to be their parents. But it's inherent in almost everything that they say and do. My father actually used to talk a lot with a lot of care. He really cared about this. One of his buddies had a father who would come home in the 60s, and my dad would be there with his friends and they'd all be hanging out, but when the dad came home, the mother would like push everybody out, and they would have to be very quiet. Everyone was terrified of the father. And what's interesting about that story is that I never actually found out why. Right? I would ask my dad, like, what was it? What was going on? What was the impetus for like keeping everybody quiet and shushing everybody? Oh, shush, shush, shush! Your father's home. You know, he didn't know. He had no idea. And there may very well have been like very good reasons why that dad needed to, when he came home, be stimulated as little as possible. There may have been medical reasons, there may have been whatever it was. That didn't matter to my dad, and he didn't care about that. What mattered was it felt to him like there was such respect in the fear that this father instilled in everybody. And by the way, I don't even know if that's true. I don't know if the reality is that everyone feared this dad. They may have just really, really loved him and knew that he needed rest and quiet after work because he worked too hard, or whatever it was. It may just be that simple, but to my dad, seeing that, in his mind, he realizes, oh man, that's really cool. I wish someday for that to happen to me. I want to come home and everybody to shush each other, and I want everybody to have a reverence and awe for me. And I think a lot of people, I've heard a lot of boomers talk about that. Um, Usually it isn't necessarily their father that they're talking about. It's almost always like a different dad. They were at somebody's house and then that happened. And I used to go to a lot of boomer car shows back when I was a kid. And I would hear this story over and over and over. They loved this. They really, really, really loved this. You have no idea how much boomers hate the fact that we do not respect them. They don't understand why they couldn't just beat that into us, because they did. That's what that for a lot of us, the spankings, the violence, the threats of violence, was in an attempt to create that hushed awe and fear, as if they were sort of this conqueror in their own home. And that obviously did an immense amount of damage, because of course that's not how any of these stories went. The stories didn't go, oh yeah, and if you accidentally tipped something over and made a glass shatter on the floor, then you were beaten within an inch to of your life, because the father would just go into a rage as if he's some kind of like Odyssean monster. And that's not what happened. That's not what it was. It was a respect that actually came from the mother in most cases. And the father was not abusive to the mother at all. It sounds to me Like if we were to actually think about what it was that these people were seeing, it sounds to me like what they really had going on was a respected father because of a loving and doting mother. And what our parents and what I tended to see in boomer parents was an attempt to reverse engineer that situation by hurting us as children, by humiliating us, by damaging us, by physically assaulting us, by psychologically assaulting us. They tried to create a situation where we were in fear of them all the time. It's fascinating because then what they would do is turn around and they would insist that they came from like this history of Pink Floyd The Wall esque damage from their own teachers and parents, but they can't ever tell you stories about it. They actually didn't, especially again, I'm talking about Americans here. Um, Unless you're like a Catholic and you went to a Catholic school and it was like staffed by a bunch of Irish or something like that, and you know you're in like the Bronx of New York or whatever, you know that's different, and there were cases, but a lot of these boomers kind of just keep taking on concepts. I think this is actually why movies were so important to them. When I think about this, is that like none of their lives come from their own lived experiences, and they're constantly telling me stories about their life that aren't even real because I'm the kind of person. I may be on the spectrum, I don't know, but I'm the kind of guy who goes, "What do you mean by that?" Or like what? Or, you know, why? And the more that you ask these questions, the more you start to realize they are lying. They are just lying through their teeth about everything. They have no, or they have like one story. It's very effeminate that way, right? It's that it's almost like talking to that girl on a date, and she just won't stop telling you like about her abusive exes, and then she just keeps talking about the one that she had, and it was like one time and it was a bad date and it was like a second or third date, and you start to realize the more that you dig and dig and dig and dig, it gets dumber and dumber and dumber and dumber. And that's what these boomers are. They're very effeminate people who take one story from their childhood where like their parents messed up, their parents finally had it with them, and they you know, they'll just run with that, man. They just absolutely run with it forever, and they still do, and they harbor it very close to their heart. And this is actually a sin. You're not supposed to do this. I mean, you know, I want to get to the sort of socio-political stuff in a second, but you know, as a Catholic, I have to say there is a tendency in human beings to sort of take their pain and turn it into a story, into a fabric, into a narrative of their life, where like one time something happened to you and you just nurse it like a drink at a bar. You just nurse it and sip it and sip it and sip it. And you cannot be doing that. You cannot do that. It's not real, for one thing. You must be real. If there's anything else that you are, it must be true. And it's not real to take one bad experience where, like, your mom or dad went over the top in hurting you, spanking you, punishing you, taking away your toys, whatever it was, and turn it into a reason why you get to be an asshole for the rest of your life. And that's what these boomers have done. It is truly shocking. So I just wanted to talk a little bit about why these boomers are talking like this. Do they keep pretending to be the greatest generation who did live in the Great Depression, who did actually have food stamps? And it's because of that. It's because they had a certain respect for their parents that they don't see in their kids, because they tried to get it too fast. They tried to have it all at once, which is so funny. Like when you think about how funny that is, that almost every argument that we end up having between millennials especially and boomers is that the boomers won't stop telling us that all we want is instant gratification. The reality is, it's the boomers that want that. It's the boomers who always took instant gratification. Always. They always pushed it on purpose to get it faster and ruined it. In every situation in life, you have to do things as true as possible, as real as possible, as timely as possible. If you're baking a cake or a pie, you have to put it in the oven for a certain amount of time. That's all life is. You're just baking pies. That's, in a lot of ways, that's all it is. And these people wouldn't stop trying to pull the pie out of the oven way too fast. And then they would get mad when the pie wasn't right, so then they would just fling it all over the living room. That is boomers in a nutshell. It really is. Okay, so let's move on now, and let's talk a little bit about what restaurants ought to cost us, because one of the reasons why America became the landscape that it is today, especially with fast food, especially with restaurants, is that there was a belief in something called the economy of scale. And this was a very conservative idea. This was a very Republican idea, a neocon idea that came from Austrian economics. I guess I don't know if it came from that, but that's certainly how it became popular. And the idea was that a restaurant is better than someone making their own food. Why? Because if you go to a restaurant, they're open, let's say they're open like 10 to 12 hours a day. Let's just say that. Let's leave it at 12 to make it even. They're open for half the day. During that time, in those 12 hours, they have a hot griddle, they have oil waiting for a fry drop, they have people on staff. Those people are getting paid, and they're getting tipped. So there's money being made, and on top of that, there is a certain kind of efficiency that develops, right? We've all had to like make ourselves breakfast, and like can't believe like how many dishes we gotta wash after it. You know, you make one single frickin' egg, and you got to wash the pan, and there's like, for some reason you've used two dishes and you don't even remember how, and there's a fork and a knife and and you're like, how did I use all this stuff? And that's actually weirdly wasteful. It is wasteful for a single person to make their own eggs that way in this sort of economic concept, right? And so the idea was, the restaurant doesn't need to do anything when you walk in and put your money down to make the food compared to you at home. You have to work so much harder to make that food than the restaurant does, because they're already up and running. They've been up and running since, let's say they open at 10. They've been open and running since 10. And you walk in at 1, everything's hot, everything's ready to go. The chefs are in the back. They've been making the ingredients. They've got it in the fridge. It's all organized. It's boxed up. Everything. They don't have to worry about anything. And their entire day is spent making sure that everything is in its place, so that at the end of the day, it all just disappears, right? And they can wash your dishes along with all the dishes of everybody else that ate at that restaurant that day. They can use a big old machine and, steam clean everything and power wash the dishes. And what that means is that there's actually a lot of economy to that. And we're doing things like saving water. We're doing things like saving gas, because again, the stuff is on anyway. So there was this idea that like, hey, why don't we just have everybody working, and then you can walk into a restaurant and just put a few dollars down. It'll be cheap. That was another thing. It'll be cheap because why would it be expensive? They're desperately trying to pull you guys in. There are market forces that keep the prices down because everyone's competing with each other. The food will be better than you could ever make it, which is true, and always has been. And the whole purpose of this is that everything becomes cheaper for everybody. And then what you do with that extra income that everybody has, because now you get to go to work instead of staying at home making an egg for yourself. You get to work an extra hour early, and because you did that, hey, that's a little bit of extra income for you. That's the idea in a nutshell. It's so funny now that boomers who lived that life now are turning around and are attempting to tell everybody else that the reason that they are poor is not because the system has been working against them, not because every single time that we think that the market might correct, the government dumps immigrants into the country and wrecks everybody's chances of getting a new house, an apartment, a job. No, 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 no. It's because you went to IHOP for breakfast. Stupid. And it's just a fascinating thing because all they have to do is say, yeah, we lived a different life than you. It was cheaper for sure. It was better. It was easier. And we just have to admit it. You guys have it harder. That's all. You guys have it harder. And we're willing to help in any way we can. But honestly, things aren't looking too good for us either. We didn't know this was going to come, and we've been spending. So we cannot give because we don't have. So we're so sorry. You are now, you're the workforce. So get to it. And I'm so sorry. I'll do what I can. And they don't do any of that. They really, really don't. What I also wanted to talk about was what this country should look like a little bit in terms of eating out, because a lot of people don't seem to even remember what this looked like. So I want to present a certain version of America to you, and it's very simple. It comes down to this: in a healthy society, in a healthy economy, in a first world, you should be able to eat out for every meal if you want to. Okay? That doesn't mean you should. That just means that you can. If you're saving for something, if you're trying to start a family, if you want a boat or an RV or a new house or a second house or a vacation home or a timeshare, then you don't go out to eat as much. And maybe you don't go out to eat at all. Maybe you work that extra hard to make up the difference, and you really, really, really do just make it. That's all. That's it. It's not more complicated than that. That's what a healthy society looks like. We live in an unhealthy society. So it doesn't look like that. Going out to eat is this bizarrely expensive thing. Weirdly, of course the groceries aren't even that much better. That's kind of the spooky part. The spooky part is like the groceries in some cases aren't that much better unless you are doing very intense things to get rid of a lot of the cost on your grocery bill. Things like, and I'm doing this now, things like you're just kind of cutting meat out in general. The end. I am. And frankly, it sucks. But on the other hand, I'm losing a ton of weight, which is nice. But that's not the reason I should be losing weight. I should not be losing weight because the economy is so bad. That is crazy. It's crazy for me to say that. That's where we're at now. You would have thought that that wouldn't have been Trump's second term, but that's how it turned out. That's how it turned out. So that is what a healthy society looks like. Let's now move on to what happens when people stop going out, because that is what has happened. I talked a little bit about that earlier in another video. The kids are not all right, and they're not going out, and they're not going to bars, they're not going to restaurants. And the reality is that you don't meet people that way. You don't get to meet people that way. The dating app scene has become so popular and then boomed and busted because people were trying to meet each other desperately. We are lonely. We're isolated. And there, I want to talk a little bit about the fact before I get to that. I want to talk a little bit about the bizarre nature of our life living with boomers, because there has always been a very, very strange, and I would call demonic, sensibility from the boomers that we must stay at home. There is this bizarre drive to sabotage every attempt that we ever make, boomers and zoomers, to get out on our own, to get to just be out. There is a constant, like, they never really left helicopter parent mode, I guess. I know my parents do this, and I know other parents do this. I've seen it too often. It's very weird. Where, like, even if you just go out and they happen to know that you're out, they'll start calling you. People will. I've been out with people, and they do this. I have this less now, because effectively, like, I kind of cut off my family. We talk about infrastructure issues at this point, and that's about it. But otherwise, I don't get the call anymore. But there was a time when I did, and there was a real sense from my parents, that, like, I owed them to come home for dinner. That was another, like, weird thing that they were doing, especially in my early 20s. Like, they were still acting like I was in high school, and that I needed to come home because the street lights were on, like that kind of thing. Very strange, super odd. There were multiple times that I had to yell at my mom over the phone that I did not need to come home for dinner. It's, and you're like 22, 23, 24, and it was that odd. It was that strange where you're picking up the phone and she's actually yelling at you, "Where are you? Where are you? Dinner is almost ready." Like, what are you talking about? What are you talking about? It is so strange that they did this to us, because the thing is, they didn't do this with their parents. They did not have this problem. Again, I've talked about this before. Getting an apartment for them was the easiest thing in the world, and it was about $350 a month, and they would make that in a week. That was, like, no matter where you were, it seems. I keep hearing that from people, and it's like East Coast, West Coast, whatever it was. Like, it was about $250 to $350 a month. No big deal. And the way that you got it was you just stopped in at the general manager's place and said, like, hey, I saw a vacancy sign. Is it still open? You take a look around. You go, yeah, I'll take it. That's it. That was it. That was the whole thing. That is how easy it was to get away from your parents. And they acted like, it's so funny because they acted like it was such a scandal, it was so hard for them at the time. And it's like, you made your rent in a week? Okay, like, what are we talking about? What are we talking about? You need to have in your bank account in so many places now, what is it, like 2-3 times the amount of rent? They want to make sure that you have enough money to pay them, because they're just so damn scared that they're not going to get their money. The boomers who own the place. It is so fascinating. It's such an interesting problem, because these people lived lives in a high trust society, and it turns out that so many of them created a low trust society because they themselves were untrustworthy and they knew it. I keep talking about how boomers always believed that their children were pulling some kind of scam on them, that there was some kind of bizarre conspiracy, I would call it, to hurt them, to scam them. And we never knew what that was, because we were really just innocent kids, and we didn't have any of those thoughts. We're talking like 6-7 years old, and the parents are already talking like, I know what you're doing. I know what you're doing. And like, we never were doing any of it. It was never real, ever. But they would make up these bizarre scandals in their head. And they were so afraid. And what became very clear is that they themselves were doing that to their parents. And so what I think has happened here is, I think that these people spent a lot of time in their youth scamming their own parents and scamming the older generations, and knowing full well that when they got into power, when they owned the apartment building, that they were going to shoot the rent up. Because instead of just seeing a free market economy and thinking, oh, that's so wonderful, thank God that we have this, it's only $350 for rent. Oh, I can start my life. I can get that job here. It's local, and I don't have to get a car, and da 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 da. There's all these things happening for you. What they were actually thinking was, oh, what a sucker. What a moron. It's $350. Why? If I owned the place, it would be $750, $850. I would just keep raising it. I'm going to keep raising it until they stop paying. Dude, bro, I'm just going to raise the prices until they can't pay anymore. I'm going to suck all the money out of people's pockets. Why wouldn't I? That's what makes sense. And weirdly, like, if one psycho does that, it doesn't work, right? Because obviously people are not going to be at that apartment complex. But if a generation does it, it becomes a conspiracy. It becomes a monopoly. And the monopoly is held by an entire generation. It's very strange. And I want to talk a little bit too about I was thinking, the prices at restaurants really have gone completely sky high. I was wondering how I would handle that if I was a restaurant at this point, because every time I walk, like I say, every time I walk into a restaurant, there's nobody there. There can be, if there's some kind of like special night. That does help restaurants, I have noticed. So like, if you're a Mexican cantina and you have like a taco night or a margarita night or something like that, that will have pull. That will have pull. Because surprise, surprise, it turns out that it really is just the pricing. And so like the hilarious thing to me is, why the hell wouldn't you just lower the fucking prices, dude? Just lower the prices and people will be in here every night. Why are you waiting for Monday? Why are you waiting for Taco Tuesday? Just lower the price so that every night is Taco Tuesday. But they can't do it. And I think they are being challenged by the landowners who are asking way too much money for the rent. And I have to say, I think that if I was a restaurant owner, I really would just shut down at a certain point. I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to do that to people, and I'm not going to live that way. And I do wonder if perhaps the right answer here is to simply say, if you're a restaurant owner out there and you're hearing this message, I would like to know if you've tried talking to your landowner, whoever it is, and saying, look, here's the reality. I'm not making enough to pay the rent. No one's coming. No one's showing up. I have to drop prices to bring people in. That's how this works. I am going to make as much as I can, and I'll show you my books, but I'm only going to give you a percentage of what I make. I'm going to give you like 10, 15%, let's say. But you're not getting what you're asking for because it's stupid. It's dumb. That's my deal. Take it or leave it. And if you leave it, I'm leaving. And you know what? Honestly, if they say no, if they say, you know what? Screw you. I don't care. I want my money. Leave. Leave. It's not worth it, man. None of this is. None of this is worth it. Nobody has a life worth living at this point. Even the successful people they're just Oh no, it's so bad. Every time I hear about these people, every time I hear another story, I never hear something good. I never hear something positive about like a successful person. It's divorce. The children are on drugs. Everyone's miserable. So stop this. Like I gotta do it for the family. No, you don't. What you probably need to do is fucking move. Okay, you need to move somewhere. You need to find a new thing. Most of these people really do have enough money that they could just retire anyway. I mean, like if when you own a restaurant, as long as it's not new, I'm talking about like the people who have been around for a while. A lot of these people could leave, and I think it's time. I think it's time for everybody to. There needs to be a change here. Obviously, it is so crazy to me that I'll walk into places that used to be like there was a time when there were certain restaurants in this area where you could not get a table right away, period. You were walking up to a line full of people out the door and you had to wait your turn. That doesn't happen anymore. So what are we doing? What's going on? And then you do sit down at one of these places, or God forbid, you go to a store, you go to a hobby shop, whatever it is, and everybody has raised their prices because they got to make the difference off of you. They got to make sure that they get their money. So now, oh, you were stupid enough to sit in here? Well, well, well. What an idiot. What an idiot. Well, moron, now we're going to make you bleed. And that's what it feels like. It feels like, yeah, everything feels like a scam, dude. People stop going when they feel like a sucker. And as it turns out, people are not as stupid as boomers think they are. That's really what this is. It all comes down to the fact that, like, to be a boomer seems to mean that you, above all else, want to get away with it, whatever it is. You are desperate to get away with it over someone else. You are there to wring the neck of a competition, and they don't even know you're doing it. They don't know that you're in a competition with them. They don't know that you're trying to hurt them. They don't know what winning means to you. They think they're just sitting down in your restaurant and you think they're a sucker for doing so. All right, so finally, let's get to the sort of fallout from this, because there is one. One of the biggest complaints that boomers and millennials have had about Zoomers is that they are very socially awkward. And that's saying a lot because millennials are, if nothing else, socially awkward. It's very difficult to have a discussion with them, but Zoomers are frightening. Zoomers are the first generation where we were actually worried for them. Millennials, it was a little tougher to get through some discussions and get through meetings without some like awkwardness, but Zoomers, it's over. I mean, I don't know what's going on, but the reality is it turns out that there is a certain amount of social networking that happens early in life and continues to happen throughout life. And, as much as I want the school system to be shut down, one of the few things that the school system did for us is it did help to create children who could talk to each other and had certain social cues built in, and memes. That there was sort of a mimetic library that made it so that we could talk to each other. And this is actually, again, like I've said this before, but this is actually one of the values of things like movies and television, and having a culture that sort of swirls around those things, because you can, if you're having, whether it's a political debate or an argument in the family, you can sort of point to those things and you can say like, well, just like this movie showed us, this is what's happening in real life. It helps. It's dumb, and that's really only for dumb people. But there are a lot of dumb people. Okay, some of us need help understanding things in a way that's overly simplified. Sorry. That is the truth. Get over it. There's so many people who get offended about that, and I've never really understood that. But that is the case here, is that Zoomers are not getting their education in sociability, and I don't know how they're supposed to do that, much less meet each other. I was talking a little bit about the dating game earlier on and why dating apps became such a thing. Well, it's not anymore, and the reason is that most guys started to realize that actually it turns out not only am I finding anyone of value, but she's ignoring me completely. It takes it takes way too much time just to get a coffee date, and then those are usually canceled. Nobody wants to talk to each other, and the reality is this: when you're doing this stuff through an app, you're really only looking at a picture. God forbid that picture is a bad picture. God forbid that picture is a picture you wouldn't have put on your dating site, on your dating app profile. It just doesn't tell a story that's worth a damn. It really doesn't. There is a magic to dating. There is a magic to love. And we forgot about that magic. And I did a video earlier about how everything feels bland now, that I don't see the spark in people anymore. I don't walk into a room and see at least a couple of girls that I think I might like to talk to right away. I used to. I used to see that. I would ignore it, and that was a discussion in another video. But I used to get that from people, and I don't anymore. I'm not merely the frustrated old man who wishes that he was younger, going to, disco clubs way past my time. This is a situation where I am not feeling it from them. I do not feel an attraction to women. There is a lack of spark in them. And there may very well be a lack of spark in me. I don't know. I look at these women and I wonder, is that what they're seeing when they look at us? When men and women are staring at each other from across the room, which also doesn't happen anymore, are they seeing like just physicality? Are they just seeing like a bicep size, a fat index score? What are they really seeing? And I think it is just like, it's just purely physical. That is not what makes love. The spark makes love, not butterflies. That is, as the meme used to go, all these women think that what they need constantly is like this butterfly feeling every time they look at a man. No. I'm talking about this sort of inner draw, this weird, indescribable, and maybe people don't even know what I'm talking about. It's very possible that, especially Zoomers, I don't think Zoomers know what I'm talking about at all, by the way. But millennials, I think, are the last generation to have experienced this, where you're just drawn to a person. And there's tragedy a lot in that because, frankly, in many cases, it's not reciprocated. I'm not saying that everybody has like a person and that there's like a light coming from every single person that you could match with, and that two people were constantly just like pairing off, exactly in some perfect divine way. That's not what I'm talking about. What I'm talking about is a certain charisma. I don't want to use the word because it's been twisted and overused, and people have all kinds of like attachments to it. They sort of add all kind of connotations to the word. But to be very general about it, there is a certain charisma to love. And it doesn't matter. It transcends the idea of, physicality. It transcends the idea of like hair loss, or like your skin losing its bounce, or your butt flattening, or your breasts drooping, or wrinkles, crow's feet, veiny legs. It transcends that because there's this thing, there's this indescribable thing to the fabric of your love that draws you to that person and always gets you excited about that person. And again, I'm not saying that there was some like grand perfect relationship all the time, like, but that spark that I'm talking about, that inner light, that something, that charisma drags you both through those times. It keeps people together. It keeps people melted together on the spot, for better or for worse. In some cases, it's for worse, but it keeps you together. And it kept the family together. And there was a sense of that. People, this idea that people on the internet won't stop screaming at each other about BMIs and facial angles, and smacking yourself in the face with a hammer to looks max, and like that's not it. Okay, what you'll get at best in that scenario, you will get laid. Sure, yeah, if you looks max and you go to the gym and blah 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 blah, yeah, okay, you will probably get laid if you have certain things. At this point, if you have the right height and you have hair, which most people fix now, I tend to notice it, at least in my area. It's actually become like very uncanny valley around here, that very few people have, like, even just like a receding hairline. Um, if you do those things, yeah, you're going to be attractive. Sure. Absolutely. You will. 100%. But it doesn't end with love. And I don't even know if I can explain to Zoomers that there is something called love. And like it's a little weird to sort of like attach that concept back to restaurants, because it's like, well, okay, what does that mean? Like, what are we talking about here? Are we really saying that, like, with the death of restaurants comes the death of love? Well, sort of, kind of, yeah. If you're stuck at home because you're like min-maxing your portfolio and you're desperately trying to eat two white pieces of bread and some Oscar Mayer turkey from Walmart every meal, because you don't go out and just have a cup of coffee somewhere and meet someone by accident. Yeah, man. Yeah. In a sense, if we lose the restaurants, we lose love. It's a weird thing to say, but it's true. And I stand by it. I do. I cannot tell you how many times in life, going out and grabbing something that was sort of silly, like, saved my life. Not just changed my life, saved my life. I'll tell you. I'll give you a version of this, and it's not a restaurant, but for a long time, I was very cheap about my T-shirts. And I found this T-shirt that I liked, and I bought extremely generic T-shirts from this company, because they were like $6.99 a pop, and they were really good quality, and I loved them. And I used the hell out of these T-shirts for years, and obviously, like, nothing to say there. Fast forward, and for some reason, and I do not know why, I started buying like designed T-shirts, because the T-shirts I used to use for $6.99 were like totally plain. And for some reason, I started buying T-shirts with designs on them that I thought looked cool, and there was no really good reason for it, and they were far more expensive. We're talking about a jump from a $6.99 T-shirt to like $25, right? This is stuff that I was getting from places I was already buying parts and stuff from. And I almost didn't. I really went back and forth, because there was this part of me that said, like, nah, come on, don't, like, this is stupid. What a dumb waste of money this is. This is so expensive for this T-shirt. You know where you can get high quality T-shirts for nothing. And I just said, screw. You know what? I'm gonna do something different. I just want to try something different. And frankly, sometimes it was just what I was realizing was by not getting these stupid T-shirts and filling out the orders that I was making, I was paying shipping anyway, right? So it was like, why don't you just start getting T-shirts? Why are you paying for shipping from these companies, and then on top of that, buying the cheap T-shirts to fill in the gap? Like, don't like let's just get real here. So I buy this one T-shirt that I thought was kind of, it really wasn't my thing, but I just had this feeling. That's all. It was just a feeling, and I bought it. And it was a cool T-shirt, and it is. I still have it. And I wore it to something, and a guy approached me because he liked my T-shirt. And it's actually turned into a men's group that I'm involved in now. That's by invitation only. Nobody knows about it. If you don't, it's one of those things where, like, if you know, you know. And it's been really excellent. Now is that gonna like get me a job? I don't know. I don't know like what the is that gonna give me a leg up in life and suddenly I become I'm not saying any of that. But you know what? Right now, all it is just a social gathering like once a month, and you know what? It's been excellent. It hasn't, has it changed my life? No. But has it like been a little bit of a spark to my day? Of course it has. Of course it changes a little bit of your life that way for the positive. In a world that otherwise is not. It's not. There are so many things in life that are just nothing but negative. And here, because I paid extra, because I did something extra, because I did something off the beaten path, my life jumped up in value. And I couldn't know when I bought that T-shirt that that's what was going to happen. But that's what happened. A lot of these boomers would stop in at a random restaurant, a Thai place in Hollywood, a coffee shop in Pasadena, and they would meet the love of their life. They would get a job. Things would happen. They would like banter with somebody in line. They would trade cards with somebody, and all of a sudden they get a phone call and they're a consultant for. There are so many stories like this. None of these boomer stories go, well, I got a job and I worked in a dark basement and I ate Oscar Mayer meat and 2 pieces of white bread and a sandwich and some tap water, and that's how I became a multi-millionaire. That's how I met my wife. Nobody says that. Because it's not real. It's not real. And it's time for us to stop pretending like the way that we all need to live is by punishing ourselves and running home at every opportunity. Or sitting in our car and eating plain sandwiches out of a sack like an idiot. The best stuff in life happens when you treat yourself and go out for that like cup of coffee. And you never know which coffee shop it's going to be. You never know what little restaurant or diner it's going to be. And by the way, I'm not even saying that you should go now. Okay? It is too expensive. It's too expensive. I don't do it. I don't do it anymore, but I mourn it. That's the difference. I am mourning a life that we are all missing. We're all losing out on this. It sucks. It sucks, and it makes no sense. The only reason this is happening, as far as I can tell, is really 2 things. Immigration and a lot of foreign fraud. Those 2 things. It's immigration and it's foreign fraud. Those are really the 2 reasons why landowners can ask so much from people. Because they know that the labor costs nothing, and that the alternative to all these places shutting down and all these businesses being closed is that we all just sit at home and die. But in America here, all of these for lease signs That's all just foreign money. All of these countries are funneling their foreign money through all of these fake businesses that exist in empty buildings in America. That's all it is. And because of that, you and I can't just go out and get a cup of coffee. A simple pleasure, a normal thing, a totally human thing in an otherwise supposedly first world country, which we are not now, by the way. We are not that. In a first world country, I could stop in for a coffee and take a few minutes to sip it. What a different world. What a world. What a different world. People used to do that. And then you would talk to the waitress. And that's another thing that you lose when you don't go to these restaurants. I cannot tell you how many people have very, very, very bad thoughts in their head because they don't verbalize them. One of the reasons I do these videos is because I want to almost check myself. And I want to make sure that the thoughts in my head are true. And sometimes what you need to do is you need to say them out loud to make sure that your inner dialogue is correct. Because hearing it is very different from thinking it. We think that we're hearing from inside. We are not. Those thoughts are not real, like in a sense, until you verbalize them. This is why the Christian religion, in a sense, begins with, in the beginning was the Word. And the Word was God, and the Word was with God. Words matter. Spoken words are different than thoughts. And a lot of people used to just yammer. They used to yammer. And of course, there was always an idiot, or mostly, maybe mostly, who would yammer and talk and just say nothing over and over again. But sometimes discussions with somebody else gives you a perspective you just can't have alone. You cannot sit in your apartment watching Netflix and eating your shitty, plain, nasty sandwich with your fluoride tap water and a bag of chips that cost like way too much. By the way, that was another thing is like I kept seeing people like showing their little meal, and it was like they'd have the sandwich and then they'd inevitably have the little chip bag, and it's like, that's expensive. That little tiny stupid chip bag is actually stupid expensive, buddy. So like, okay, so that's where all your money is going. You know, we could do this dance forever. We could just do this dance forever where like I just point at you and you point at me and we just keep on screaming at each other that we're spending too much instead of talking about the real problem, which is that we should be able to go out and have a cup of coffee and talk with the waitress to meet the love of our life, to get an idea for a new business, to talk with somebody about our family and how we should deal with them, because you get a perspective from somebody that you met that day because you stopped on the side of the road and got a cup of coffee. That's different. That's a different life for us. And instead we go home and we eat, we're supposed to eat whatever's in our fridge from the grocery store, and then we get on Twitter, and once again, you're not speaking your thoughts, you're typing your thoughts. That is not the same. I think a lot of people who are typing the stupid stuff on Twitter would have a very different life if they actually spoke it to a person. Once it comes out of your mouth and you actually hear it come back to you, because that's what has to happen. You have to speak it and then it has to come back to you, and now you're hearing it as if it was almost like from someone else. You would be surprised how many of your thoughts you disagree with when you actually start to say them aloud. So yeah, this is what we lost, and this is what people are screaming about. It's not the prices, and it's not the person that's paying $40 on DoorDash for a boba tea. We know that person is an idiot. Okay? We just want our dollar coffee back. We want to throw $1 on the counter and get a cup of coffee at a diner and sit down and talk to somebody. We want people to talk to us. Nobody talks to each other anymore. Everyone's so terrified of scaring each other and bothering each other that nobody talks like this. Certainly not openly. There's a Denny's by the grocery store that I go to, and I'll go in there sometimes. It is dead quiet. It is unbelievably quiet. The only thing that you'll ever hear in there are babies because they don't know and they don't have a phone. It is dead quiet. And there are people in there. Some of them are like family. Some of them, it's not full, as I've been telling you. These places are never full anywhere at any time. But it is dead quiet because everyone is on their freaking phone. Whole families at the table just doom scrolling at brunch. This is not good. This is not good. So I'll close with this. If you guys want a better life for yourself, you don't do that by buckling down and buckling down and buckling down on your spending. If you have to, you have to. We all do. I'm doing it. But that's not how you get a better life. That's how you survive. And if you have to survive today, survive. That's the most important thing. But if we're talking about you becoming inspired, if we're talking about you getting a life, if we're talking about you touching grass, if we're talking about you having something so that you're not depressed all the time, getting rid of the fog in your brain, getting rid of the evil thoughts in your heart and your head, about getting a companion in life, somebody to laugh with, that doesn't happen on a Walmart lunch, okay? That happens by engaging in the greater society that you live in. And I know, the reality is that you going to some Denny's or something and hoping to have some extra special discussion with the waitress is like kind of a pipe dream. But what I'm going to tell you now is you have to be the change that you want to see in the world. If you want those discussions and you want to feel like at the end of the day that you had a day worth having, you must provide the discussion. You need to talk to people. You need to ask people what they're doing and how they're feeling and what their politics are. You have to risk rejection. You must risk rejection. You will be rejected. There will be people who will never stop looking at you like you're nuts. And that is something that you have to be willing to deal with. And you have to simply have the maturity to know that those people are sick. They're mentally ill. And they don't have the bandwidth for you, and that's okay. And you know what? Sometimes you can learn something from those encounters. Sometimes it's even those encounters that are life-changing lessons. Have those lessons. Learn from those lessons. Risk rejection.